See here, got to turn this thing on for it to work. All right. So before we go further, we need to kind of define exactly what is heat stress. What are we looking for, and exactly what is it? So basically, heat stress is the inability of cattle to dissipate heat in an efficient manner. They're different than we are. We can cool off a lot sooner and quicker than they can. Cattle are different. So, in turn, when they can't dissipate that heat, we're going to see some reduced performance and more susceptibility to health issues. And heat stress can be shown to reduce milk production in our cows, feed intake, weight gain, and then even conception rates in our cow herd. So a lot of key crucial performance traits that we could be missing out on. So now that we kind of know exactly what heat stress is, we're going to look at some signs of heat stress. So there's a slide that just came up. This is a kind of a general and typical picture of a cow that's exhibiting some, I would say, earlier signs of heat stress. You're going to see some open mouth breathing. They can start foaming or drooling at the mouth, and their respiration rate is going to be increased. And then you'll also hear and see labored breathing. They're going to be breathing a lot harder to get a grasp of air. So once you get to more advanced signs, you're going to see cattle may start to shake. They're going to lose coordination, and then they even may go down if they're in a real tight situation of heat stress. If they do go down at that point, after they've exhibited those signs, they're going to be trickier to recover at that point. And again, some of those underlying symptoms that we don't see visually in the moment of heat stress, and those are going to be our performance scenarios that I previously mentioned. Your conception rates, your average daily gain, your feed intake are all going to be affected by heat stress. So how do we prevent or at least minimize heat stress? Again, here in the Brazos Valley, really no way to get around it. It's going to be there. So we just need to look at trying to mitigate some of the issues and some of the management practices that we're doing. And what that main thing is to supply an ample amount of fresh, clean drinking water. Stock tanks are good because cattle can get them in them physically and cool off, but having fresh pumped water is going to be ideal for your operation. It's just going to be an overall healthier scenario for your cattle. Time of working cattle, that is also crucial with heat stress. If cattle must be processed, doctored, or dealt with in any way, do so as early as you can in the morning. That's going to be our coolest temperatures in the day. So ideally before 10 a.m. and even at that point, we all know it's getting very hot at that time. So now we have a chart on the board here, and we can really see a huge part that the humidity plays a role in the temperature, and the temperature, ambient temperature, and the humidity come together to create our temperature humidity index. So we may think it's cool outside, but that may be different story for our cattle herds. So if you can read this, I'm not sure how clear it's coming on your screen, but on the left-hand side, you have your temperature, and then on the top, you have your relative humidity. And so you can see as the temperature rises and that humidity rises, our temperature humidity index increases as well. So you can see most of this chart, except for some of those cooler temperatures, are in that kind of alert stage. We increase to danger and emergency stages in a hurry. So again, take into account what the humidity is doing. Around here in the Brazos Valley, our annual average humidity is about 73%. So keep that in mind when you're needing to process your group of cattle. So I talked about the ability to dissipate heat, and it's pretty interesting on how cattle differ from humans. And so Dr. Grant Dewell at Iowa State University, he wrote an article on their ability to dissipate heat. And it was interesting to see, he said that the core temperature in those individual cattle, they don't peak until 2 hours after the peak daytime temp. So generally we see that peak daytime temp around 4 in the afternoon, maybe even 5, just depending on the day. So with that being said, the cow's core temperature is at this hottest point at 6 p.m. So again, we think it's an evening time, it's cooling off, but really they're not at their hottest point until 6 in the evening. Then he goes on to say that it takes up to 6 hours for cattle to dissipate heat and kind of recover from that previous day's heat. So with that being said, at 6 p.m. that they're hottest, it's not until midnight that they've kind of recovered and dropped that core temperature to a safer and less severe range. And so if we do have to work them, do not keep them in the pen for more than 30 minutes during the hot months. Most of the time we're lacking shade in those pen scenarios. They don't have water. So if we do need to process or get them in and out, we need to do that quickly. And that brings me to my next point. Shade is key. It's crucial. We can't keep our cattle away from the ambient temperature, but we can keep them away from the sun and cooler under shade. We have trees in our pastures. If you don't have adequate trees, you can supply man-made structures. And if you need to make those man-made structures, on the screen here, you'll see some good kind of guidelines as to how big those shade structures should be. And so we see that it's 15 to 20 square feet recommended for a 4-weight calf, 25 square feet for an 8-weight calf. And then if you have a full-grown cow, she's going to need 30 to 40 square feet of shade structure. So just keep those kind of criteria in mind if you're looking to build a shade structure. So Texas Tech they do a lot of research on shade in cattle and the effects of that shade. So they did some research on some heifers. They were kind of more in a dry lot kind of confinement situation. So you can correlate that to maybe some weaning some calves that you just pulled off their moms. And so this study has a whole lot of information. Don't have time to get into it all. So I'm just going to pick some high points that maybe correlate and a little bit more relevant to this talk. So with the shaded group, when they left the shade, they spent their more time eating and drinking. So they were being more efficient with their time. The ones that without the shade, they exhibited a lot of antagonistic behavior. They were bullying each other. They were riding each other more, and just overall being less efficient, spending more energy during those times. So again, that shade was crucial just to the overall comfortability of the cow. The ground temperature in the shade was 60 to 90 degrees. In the non-shaded group, they saw temperatures of 110 to 130 degrees. So those cattle, those heifers, could not get away from those high temperatures. The respiration rate also, and we touched on that. So you'll see that in the first signs, they were 30% less in the shaded group than those that were not shaded. And then they went ahead and compiled all this different data. And again, there were more points that I didn't discuss, but they put a dollar amount to it. And so at the end of the trial, they saw that there was an $18 per head increase in those shaded cattle just because they were less stressed. Their performance was better than those with non-shaded. So again, you can put a dollar amount to what you're doing for your herds when it comes to shade. So we're going to put up some examples of some man-made shade structures. If you do need to add some, maybe in your working pens, or maybe your pasture setting does not have sufficient trees. So top left is going to be a shade cloth situation, or both pictures on the top are shade cloth. The top left one is actually mobile, so you can actually move that from pasture to pasture. And there are varying differences in the shade. You have 80% shade, 60% shade. So when you're looking at, potentially buying some shade, make sure that it's going to be adequate to reflect, or not reflect, but to block the sun for those cattle. The bottom ones are more of a permanent scenario. You got sheet metal on pipe, or you can do a wood structure if that fits your operation better. But just a couple different options that may fit what you have. We go back to water. There's a bunch of different types of watering systems for cattle. they all work great. There's galvanized, poly, concrete tanks, tire drinkers. There's just, the list goes on. The biggest thing, we just need to make sure that there's enough surface area for the amount of cattle that you're dealing with. A good rule of thumb is about 3 inches of trough space per animal. So just kind of try to determine how big a surface area you have, and also your pen size. If they're smaller pen size, they're going to be closer to water, more access. So it may be not as crucial as if you had a large pasture where they're all coming together, all needing water at the same time. Just look at, again, your operation individually. University of Nebraska states that cattle will drink about a gallon of water per 100 pounds during the winter. In the summer, that doubles to 2 gallons per 100 pounds. So if you correlate that to a 5-weight calf, they're going to drink about 10 gallons per day. A full-grown 1,400-pound cow, she's going to drink upwards of 28 gallons, 30 gallons. So having that ample supply will be crucial for your operation. And I just threw up some options for some water troughs here. We're getting it pulled up. We all kind of know what a water trough is, but just wanted to give you some options and ideas. You got galvanized on a concrete pad, poly tank. Good option also is a fence line drinker or water trough. You can split a fence line and use it for 2 different pastures. So those are some just different options and ideas. The bottom right, it has those balls. They push them down. They learn how to use that, and it keeps a good supply of fresh, clean drinking water at all times. So we talked about water. We talked about shade, which are crucial. There's some other options that we can look at. And one of those is what we're feeding our cattle. So during the hot months, we need to look at maybe feeding a lower protein level in our feed and increase the energy. Because metabolizing excess nitrogen when protein is fed above requirement uses energy and produces heat that is counterproductive during the times of heat stress. So we also need to look at during these times that they're going to consume less. Their feed intake is going to be lowered. So ration higher energy will help to recover some performance losses. And when you add that fat at a reasonable level, we can help improve performance losses due to that heat stress. And in addition to that, adding that energy, the act of dissipating heat requires a lot of energy for our cattle. So we need to make sure that our energy level is adequate and sufficient so that they can accomplish that in a good manner. We also need to look at maybe strategically feeding our cattle at different times of the day. We don't want to go out there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and feed them a big heavy load of protein because that heat of digestion will increase and add to that heat load in our animals. So even feedlots, sometimes they'll feed at, in the early morning hours. So we just need to take into account all those different areas. And then during the summer, if you're short on grass and you do need to feed hay, we need to make sure that it's a good quality hay, because if you have poor and less digestible hay, that'll also cause more heat to be created in the digesting process, and it just adds to that heat load. So we just need to look at what you're feeding there. There's other feed ingredients that you can use to reduce heat in your different rations. We don't have time today to dive into each one of those individually, but if you have any questions on a specific ingredient that you've heard or want to know more about that may reduce some heat, we have an on-staff nutritionist. We can help you and figure out a program that works for you. There's another mineral I'll mention. It's called Vitafirm heat mineral, and I wanted to touch on that because there's some products out there that are designed specifically for times of heat, and this Vitafirm has Amifirm. It's inside of it, which is basically a prebiotic that it's kind of proven to combat some heat stress. And what that does is it helps stimulate the appetite. It increases the digestibility in the feed that they're receiving, and it maximizes nutrient absorption, which we all know minerals and nutrients are crucial to our cattle herd. There's also another product in there. It's capsaicin. It's a vasodilator that helps with dissipation and helps maintain that feed intake during the heat stress episodes that we see. And then it also causes more like a snack eating throughout the day. So they're going to eat smaller meals. So again, we reduce that heat load through the digesting process, and it increases water intake, which we've already touched on, which is crucial. There's other options that aren't directly related to heat exactly, but there's other ways that we can help mitigate the heat stress in our cattle. And one of those is fly control. The last thing we want when we're hot and tired and sweaty is to have a fly buzzing around our head. It's annoying. So I can only imagine if you're a heifer out in the pasture or a cow that has hundreds of flies on her, that just adds to the heat stress that she's already enduring. She's going to be agitated. She's going to be moving more. And so there's options for that. There's fly tags you can put on your cattle. There's a pour on that you can run them through your chute, or back rubs that they can actually go underneath it. And I'll mention this talk today is, more of a general pasture setting for cattle, maybe like I said, weaning cattle. But when you look at show cattle, it's kind of a totally different scenario. They're going to be in a barn generally. You're going to have fans. There's different balanced rations you're going to look at. So if you have specific questions to that, we can help you on the side. So I just put up a couple slides here. That picture of the calf, it's got flies all over him. It's only adding to heat stress. So we throw on some fly tags, and it's going to minimize the effect of flies that are going to have. And that top right picture, it's not the best quality picture, but I really liked the scenario that they showed it in. If you do want to use a back rub, which is a good option for fly control, they put it in a situation where she's basically forced to go under it. They are feeding her basically down an alley in a pen situation. So she kind of has to go underneath that and get the benefit of it. So in closing, we all know it's hot and humid out there, but after we're outside working, we can hop in the pickup, we can head to the house and soak in that AC. But our cattle herds, they're stuck out in it. So we need to make sure that our management practices are not only helping to alleviate those stresses, but we're not actually contributing to the heat stress. And every cattle operation is different. There's different types of cattle, breeds, different sizes of cattle, ages. And so you just need to determine the best program for your outfit and stick to it. Because that's gonna help your cattle be more productive. Your performance is gonna be better, and then in turn, hopefully, your pocketbook will benefit from that at the end of whatever your operation is looking to do. If you need help with summer rations, water troughs, fly control, or just to ask us any questions that you may have specific to your operation, we're here for you. We'd love to help. And like I said, I'm an outside field rep. We can come on location, take a look at what you have. Our in-house nutritionists can help with anything you have there. And then just remember shade, water, feed formulas, and the time of working. And again, I want to hit that time of working again. Make sure that you're not trying to move cattle or process cattle in the heat of the day, because that can be a detriment to your herd. So now we'll go on to some questions. If anybody has questions, Cody went over how to do that. I'll go over the 4 ways to ask questions again. You can text in. It's 979-272-6815. Or you can ask us in the question and answer portion of our Zoom, or you can ask on Facebook Live, or you can also click the raise the hand button. So if you got any questions, send them in. If we can't get to them all, we'll be able to answer them afterwards, and be able to help you that way. So we'll see here if any questions come in. Looks like there's a few coming in off our Zoom question and answer. It says, does the location of water help with heat stress? And I would say absolutely. A lot of times, maybe in a pasture setting, we're trying to have cattle graze different areas of the pasture. So we're maybe extending our mineral and putting it in one spot and having them travel further. But I'd say in times of heat stress, we need to make sure that they can get water when they need it. So So best management practice would be to have it close by so they can get water at any portion of the day. It's a good question. And again, just have ample surface area for the amount of cattle that you're dealing with. Here's another question. Let's see. It says, if cattle must be worked during unfavorable conditions, would a mister or sprinkler system help? So this is kind of a twofold. So again, we talked about time of working cattle. If we really need to work them in the morning, but if you have some calves that are getting sick and they have to be doctored, and you don't think they can make it to the next day and they need to be coming in, I would say a mister is actually could potentially make your problem worse. It actually increases the humidity. So if you can have actually droplets of water, that's actually going to be more beneficial. So in that scenario, I would say a sprinkler system would be good. And if you have the ability to have some shade structure over your working pens, would be awesome as well. Looks like Facebook Live, we have a question there. Can conception rates be negatively affected by heat stress? And absolutely. So the heat that the cow produces can actually have a negative effect on the oocyte and the embryo on the early stages. And that'll actually have a negative effect. I was reading that actually they can conceive in a good manner. That's not actually the issue. It's just that first 7 days that they're trying to fertilize that egg, that's when that heat stress comes into play, and that oocyte is not as capable of doing its job. So that's definitely a good question. So that conception rate in your herd can really be affected. Here's another good question. Would a limiter feed be a good option in the summer? And there's really two theories of thought here, because we talked about that Vitafirm mineral having it doing snack eating and multiple times a day. And so that's good because we're not getting that big load of feed. We're not really increasing that heat load of the digestion process. So in that sense, a limiter feed would be a good option, just because they're going to come in, grab a bite, and then they're going to go back out to shade, hopefully. But on the other side, generally limiter feeds are not as palatable for that reason, that they're limiting. So we need to really make sure that our cattle are getting adequate nutrients through this time. So we need to make sure, again, that it has enough energy, that they're going to supply enough for their bodily processes to dissipate the heat. So we just need to take into account both factors there to see what works for your operation. Looks like we got another one here on Facebook Live coming in. It says, what stresses cattle most in the summertime? Flies or lack of shade? And I'd say it all comes together. They're going to be stressed, and just because of the heat, we get stressed when we're out there. So anything that adds to it, like flies or the inability to get out of the sun, is just going to compound that. So I would say there's not really one specific option or idea that is going to cause the most stress besides the ambient temperature and humidity, but it all comes together. So as many ideas that we can minimize will actually help our cow herds, like adding shade or doing a fly control. So I think it's more of an overall condition that they're in, instead of specific pinpointed things. And really, if I had to pick one, it would be moving cattle during hot summer times. It looks like we've got, let's see, another. With respect, I can't read this. I'm going to have to come. Okay, so it says, with respect to conception, are there periods during the summer that the bull will be less fertile? And that is a good question. So you will see that the heat stress and the heat load, the body of a cow or a bull, there's a range that is acceptable for them. So if we get out of that range, we can see different fertility losses in those animals. So I would say that you can definitely see a reduced fertility rate in our bulls. So, and also a good option to do is always fertility test your bulls to see what your semen counts are, to see if your bull is strong and healthy to go through the times of heat stress, because any of these factors can play a negative role in our cow herds and our bulls as we go through the hot summer months. Looks like we have another question here. Looks like maybe our last one, unless some more come up. It says, does producers sell shade cloth? And yes, we do. We can custom make it to fit whatever scenario you're looking for. We have the 80%, and which is going to be the most beneficial for your cow herds. And so we definitely have that. We can help you determine how to measure that on your location, and we can go from there and definitely help you out with that. So let's see if any more comes through, or again, after this video, if you see it later today, you're welcome to ask us questions, and we'll be more than happy to get back with you. And if you have any more questions or any ideas not regarding heat stress, we're always here for you at Producers Cooperative. This is what we do, and we enjoy it. We enjoy helping y'all. So thank y'all for tuning in, and I'm sure we'll be back with more, and we appreciate it, and stay safe out there. Thank y'all.